Hey, Jennifer. My name's Jessie Hobson. Firstly, I want to thank you for the link last night, and yes, I did like your film.
Oh, great, good. Thank you.
After watching both A Million Miles Away and Knives and Skin, I need to ask, what kind of films did you watch growing up?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I grew up in a household, with parents who loved movies. And one of the first films that I remember, my mom imploring me to watch, probably at a time, when I wasn't really ready to watch it, was Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, which is a film that I still dearly love. So in a way, for better or for worse, I think that, that was a film that has been still really formative for me. But it was a film that my mother really loved, and so I remember, watching that as a little kid. But I also remember, watching things like, all the Pink Panther movies, for instance. And I know that seems like a stretch from Pink Panther to Knives and Skin, but I also grew up in a household that loved kind of absurd humor and physical comedy. And so that to me, the trajectory between Pink Panther or even like the Carol Burnett show is really clear in how I write and how I write humor, for instance, in a film like this. But I also loved the original Carrie. When that first came out, I remember being really terrified of it, but also being completely obsessed with the imagery in that movie, especially the final scene with Carrie in her pink prom dress, covered in blood, burning the school down.
And with Knives and Skin, it doesn't necessarily have to be like film or movies, but like, what were some of your inspirations going into this project?
So, it has a very distinctive visual palette, let's say, in terms of the color and the kind of textures we created. So, for instance, like with my DP, Chris Rajano, we would have conversations around the color palette. We decided to use vintage anamorphic lenses that respond in a very specific way to lighting. I had many conversations with my production designer about the set decoration and the wardrobe and how specific I wanted all of that to be. With early on, we decided that in terms of the color palette, we really wanted this film to feel kind of drenched in magenta or like drenched in pink, kind of as a symbol of girlhood. No gender owns pink, but, there is something very feminine about the color pink, let's say. And so we knew we kind of built the entire, look of the film around this idea of, vibrating pink.
I'm glad you mentioned that because from start to finish, it kind of felt like lighting and color not only played key roles in the film, but they kind of became characters themselves. I wanted to ask about like some of the relationships. They felt very real and personal. Were these characters based on personal experiences or people that you knew?
So for me, the only sort of storyline that's based on something that happened to me in my real life is the storyline between the substitute teacher and Joanna. When I was in high school, there was a student teacher who would write me like explicit love poems and give them to me in my homework. I was very naive at the time and thought that everybody in the class was getting explicit poetry back from him. I never sold him my mother's drugs like it happens in the film. That was not at all part of my own autobiography. But it definitely was the case that, when I was 16 and just trying to be, a normal 16-year-old girl, going through, the average high school experience, there was a grown man who was trying to, kind of disrupt that process. I wasn't damaged by that relationship by any means, and in fact, there was never a relationship that formed. I was not interested in him whatsoever. But it took me a while. It took me a while to sort of unpack that experience, and to really understand how selfish he was, and to really think about how selfish so many adults are, in the sense of what they drag their children into, in terms of an adult's own kind of emotional turmoil. Adolescent people are still children, in the sense that they need guidance and they need stability. And, I see oftentimes, adults who are only able to sort of indulge in their own emotional trauma and kind of have lost the ability to effectively parent their children, which just seems almost abusive to me. Growing up, I had a great relationship with my parents. I'm still very close to my own mother. I have 3 children of my own who I feel very engaged with. So the mothers are not based on my experience either as a mother or with my own mother. But as a screenwriter who's been making films for a long time, or as a writer and director who's been making films for a long time, it's sort of my job to be, kind of nosy and to try to figure out what makes people tick. And I'm most curious about writing characters who are falling apart, so I'm always paying attention to, the people around me who are falling apart.
And there's a lot of connections with the short film, A Million Miles Away. Would you prefer that someone watch that first before jumping into Knives and Skin, or do you have any preference at all?
I think people should watch Knives and Skin first, kind of like get into it, right? Buckle in, enjoy the ride, and then I would love for people to be able to go back and watch some of the short films that I made leading up to Knives and Skin. There's no right or wrong way to do it, right? People can start short, and then lead up to the 111-minute, film that is Knives and Skin. But I feel most proud of Knives and Skin. It's exactly the film that I set out to make. I feel so thankful that I had full creative freedom over the final edit of that film, and so that's where I'd love for people to start.
And kind of speaking of the film and the comparisons that it's been getting, I've heard Donnie Darko and Twin Peaks, and what do you think of those comparisons? Like, how does it? Because it's definitely an original piece, but as the person that kind of went through that entire process, like, how does that feel to you hearing those things?
On the one hand, those are great examples. Donnie Darko was a great film. Twin Peaks was a great series. David Lynch has made remarkable films. So those comparisons, on the one hand, are complementary. But I also think that they can be a little lazy, especially for the reviewers who simply stop at that and say, this is very Twin Peaks-like, and I don't have much more to say about it than that. Because certainly, in the entire roster of films ever made that dealt with small towns, that dealt with missing girls, that have woven surreal elements into the storytelling process, that had used ensemble casts, that have dealt with sort of magical, visual elements, for instance, or kind of absurd storylines. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of other examples. For me, a film that maybe was River's Edge. It's a film from the late 80s with Keanu Reeves and Ione Skye and Crispin Glover, and it takes place in a small town where we are introduced to the body of a dead girl on the edge of the river.
Yeah.
And, we watch her friend group sort of react to that, over the course of this film. And it's a really kind of a gritty, raw film that's led entirely by these teenagers who are all seem to be kind of parentless and on their own. But certainly, I love the visual style of Donnie Darko, and I love that kind of surreal storytelling. I love the way that David Lynch suggests that small-town America is the portal to the fourth dimension. I think that, that Lynch pays a lot of attention to production design and visual language, which I think I do as well. I've more appreciated when, when critics and reviewers and writers have thought about the film a little more broadly and tried to think of, comparisons outside of that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like, ultimately, I kind of felt it was like a task trying to connect the film to those types of other projects. Ultimately, I thought it stood on its own pretty well, and including those comparisons in the trailer ultimately kind of felt a little misleading from my perspective.
Right, and I think like I said, sometimes for the most part, it's done in a way that feels complimentary, but there's also been a way that it's been done in a dismissive way, which is irritating. It's as though to say, there was this TV series that was made 20 years ago. I mean, of course, there was a remake recently, and no one can make a surreal, absurd drama in a small town where a dead girl goes missing ever again. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Like lighting and color, also music plays a pretty key role in this film. Did you have any issues? Like, did you run into any problems, like gathering the rights, or were there music that maybe you missed out on that you would have been or wish you could have been included in the film?
Yeah, so all the songs that are included right now, obviously we have all the publishing rights for, but there was an early draft of the script which included Madonna's Lucky Star, and my music producer literally could not get anybody to answer either an email or a phone call or a note written in the sky with a biplane. I mean, it was like just crickets. And then I also wanted to use, also in an early draft of the script, the song over the end credits was "Don't Change" by In Excess.
Yeah.
And we did get, their representatives to reply, but dealing with posthumous estates is also very difficult and time-consuming. So sadly, Michael Hutchins is no longer with us, and sort of in his estate is tied up a lot of the publishing rights for those songs. And I also wanted to at some point use a song by the Smiths. And as much as I disagree with Morrissey's current sort of nationalist politics, it turns out that the Smiths songs, even for publishing, are extremely expensive. So that was, we got a quote from that, but we just couldn't afford it.
Also considering that most of the cast does sing, how was the casting process for this project? Like, is it a little more tedious considering that they will not only have to act but sing as well?
Yeah, so, we cast this film all out of Chicago. I'm based in Chicago.
Okay.
And so when people came into audition, when the young people came into audition, because the adults didn't have to sing, even though the clown dad and tiger shirt mom and the sheriff all sing in the Promises section, they didn't have to, carry a tune. That's a scene that you're allowed to, your voice is allowed to crack. That's actually part of the kind of pathos of that scene. But when we auditioned, all of the young people, all those girls had to, belt one out. I mean, they could choose whatever song they wanted, but they had to at least carry a tune. And then I worked with this woman, Jen Lennon, who I've worked with through Blood Below the Skin and A Million Miles Away. He used to be a conductor for the Chicago Children's Choir. She's the one who rearranges all of those songs and then teaches them to the girls and is conducting the girls while they sing, just outside of the frame. And she's an invaluable part of why those singing scenes work so well.
Yeah, I was blown away. My sister's actually in a choir, actually multiple choirs, and to see it, on film and be so interesting was pretty impactful. To kind of conclude here, I wanted to get your thoughts on if someone's on the fence about seeing this film, what would you say to sway them? Like, why should people go see this movie? It's a beautiful film, but I'm always curious as to like how you would get someone to buy that ticket.
Well, I would say that this film has something for everyone because it's an ensemble cast. There's no way that anyone would walk out of that theater and not feel connected to at least one person in this film. And it really is an entertaining film that borrows from a lot of genre, right? So if you love teen films, if you love musicals, if you love horror or thriller, if you love magical realism, there's going to be a little bit of that in this film for you. And it's a film about human connection, and my gosh, who's against human connection? Plus, I think that it's a film that feels, in a way, like it's for film lovers. I mean, in a way, this film is a love letter to film lovers and to filmmaking. We shot it with these beautiful vintage anamorphic lenses. It really is a truly cinematic experience. So if you love film, you should at least take a taste of Knives and Skin. I like to say buckle in and enjoy the ride. And if you do that, if you let yourself really fall down the wormhole of this film, you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, and I can definitely vouch for that. I know it's a little soon to ask this, but do you have any plans for your next project, or are you already working on something? Like, what can we look forward to?
Yeah, so I'm actually in development with a new feature-length film. It's called A Girl and Other Small Stains. It is, well, I like to call it a coming-of-age cat people meets fish tank. So it's a kind of a nuanced teen shapeshifter story. And, unlike Knives and Skin, this one has one protagonist. It's more plot-driven. It's very genre-committed. But it will still have all of the nuances and the absurdities that people love about Knives and Skin, but it's slightly more accessible. So the Knives and Skin fans will love A Girl and Other Small Stains, but I think that this one will even have a more broad audience. And I'm in development. We're hoping to shoot it this summer, so it's not going to be too much longer until you have another Jennifer Reeder film. Excellent.
Well, I had a great time jumping into your catalog last night, and we definitely look forward to the next film. Thank you, Jennifer, for your time. Here at CineDump, we let the doers know how they're doing, and you're doing just fine. Thanks again.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you. Have a good day.